communicative tasks that might be happening in your own context, that some of what I notice here with peer review is going to apply. Anyway, let's get started. This is my lovely abstract. I was going to read it and put everyone to sleep and then run away for 20 minutes. But since we're being recorded, I'm not going to do that. However, the first line of the abstract, I think, is important, that there are people who think that online teaching is going to replace offline classes. And we need to know how they compare. And so this was I did a different study with a different task last year. And in the same vein, I had an opportunity to do this one with peer review and coming up with some similar ideas across both. Anyway, boom. I'm going to talk a little bit about why we might do peer review in a writing class. A few comments very generally about different approaches to peer review. And then the approach I've been taking for the last several years and some of the rationale behind that, and how it might also match other kinds of tasks that aren't necessarily writing or not necessarily peer review. A brief mention about why I use Zoom and not something else, and then go right into the study. So let's get started. Peer review. And in writing, peer review just means having another learner or learners read a student's writing and comment on it with the aim of improving the work. We're not talking here about peer grading, which is related, but also different. Peer review here is a formative activity in that the review comes at a time when the writer still has a chance to either act on it or ignore it and make their writing better. And one very simple distinction about how to do peer review is we can guide them as a teacher. We can give them either a set of questions or a chart to fill out, or in the case of school textbooks, just little circles, smiley faces, and you circle one. Or we can be unguided and just tell the reader to comment about anything, what they like, what they didn't like, whatever, and just leave it up to them. Either way, it still qualifies as peer review. There is a problem, though, that I noticed, and for a long time, I did not do peer review for this basic reason. Now, we know that getting feedback is part of the process approach to writing, but feedback from peers is viewed as less expert, less capable, less knowledgeable, and there is a strong preference for teacher feedback. I cite myself, I could cite probably 300 people who found that same finding. And this, in my case, was to the point of ignoring peer feedback totally. And the major concern here is the proficiency level of the reviewer and the proficiency level of the reviewee, leading to this kind of a cycle that the students feel peer review is a waste of time, they don't engage with it sincerely, and end up wasting their time. It's a problem. So, and a quick aside here into another distinction we need to point out. The asynchronous peer review done out of class is often done these days with shared documents. Students put comments on them, Google Docs or MS Word in OneDrive. Audio recorded comments, and very recently, some wonderful research coming out of Iran, and I believe Seoul National University, James Wood was doing some work with this as well, with screen sharing, or more precisely, screen recording, using screen recording software as the peer review method. Very interesting stuff. It's out of class, so it takes more of the students' time, and students sometimes hate spending that extra time doing this peer review when they could be doing something else. Synchronous peer review is done in class. You're speaking to the person directly. What we're going to talk about briefly today is speaking to another person while the writer overhears the conversation. And the problem with this is how much time do you allocate for reading? And usually we might do this in advance. Have the students read the papers in advance using a discussion board or an LMS, and then come to class ready to give peer review. Okay, who benefits from peer review? The intention of peer review is that the writer benefits. And the evidence is actually quite limited in EFL contexts of the writer getting enough benefit to markedly improve their paper. In fact, there's still debate about whether teacher feedback helps. So peer feedback helping the writer, the evidence is really mixed. However, using peer review to make the students read more or make them read more critically, suddenly we're getting into a different aspect of it. And we do know from these two studies, among others, these are the classics, that peer review helps the reviewer. It trains the reader how to read and therefore how to write their own papers better. And collaboration is also generally helpful for writing. So taking all of this together, my colleague, sorry, I'll come back to this. My colleague, Todd Jobbitt, and I came up with something called the peer review circle. And in this case, we have generally 3 people, 2 reviewers, 1 writer, and the writer has to shut up and listen while the 2 reviewers talk about their work. They're not allowed to talk. So in a face-to-face situation in the classroom, I tell the writer to turn around and face the wall while the other 2 members are talking about their paper. Online, they have to mute. And generally, 1 reviewer will start with a monologue, a timed monologue, and then the second reviewer will join in and comment on what the first reviewer said. And then after listening for a pre-designated amount of time, 5 to 10 minutes, the writer can join in the discussion of their own work. So they have to shut up and listen. For my adult university classes, that's about 7 minutes of listening before they're allowed to talk if we're reviewing an essay. So we have A and B talking. So A starts for a couple of minutes. B is the other reviewer, and they're now going to talk for 7 more. And finally, the writer joins in. So this is a kind of communicative task. It's a little more structured and doesn't follow a particular real world scenario. So I'm not going to say it is a task. We can think of it as a pedagogical task. Where there's a communication of information between these 2, which person C needs. And then when they're done, we go on. I'm going to skip that. Okay. I've said all of this already, but this is what happens. There's a monologue, a dialogue, and throughout this, the writer is silent. Then there's a discussion. Why would we do this? Well, my Todd and I found more feedback, just specifically more feedback, more moves, more items, more things talked about. And then I found that in this case, in the peer review circle, I found nearly double the amount of feedback in the review circle than in a partners just talking about one person's paper. And in the case here, 40% of the feedback in pairs, this would be one person talking to another person about the other person's paper. 40% of the feedback was affective. It was, I like it. I think you did a good job. Cheerleading feedback, while only 13% was affective feedback and 87% was focused on structured discourse or planning in the peer review circle. So where you had 2 people talking before the speaker could, before the writer could come in, we had a very different nature of feedback. We had things that were focused on the writing as opposed to things that were focused on the writer. And there is some of that data. Peer review in pairs. 3.1 feedback moves per minute. In circle, almost 7. And we can see affective feedback. Nearly half of their feedback here is just about, I like this, I think this is nice, as opposed to, or you did a good job, as opposed to, you need a period, the grammar is wrong here, you need a topic sentence, next time you need better sources, these kind of things. Okay, about Zoom, because I am comparing here this kind of activity on Zoom as opposed to this kind of activity in a classroom. Now, Zoom, as we know, has breakout rooms, which at the time of my study, the other apps, Google Meet, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, did not have. Zoom also allows the host to give permission to students or members to record their BOR. So I would give one of the writers, one of the students, the right to record, and then they would have to send me the recording. Zoom also allows screen sharing and text chat between members. And the chat can also be saved. And the teacher can drop in on any session and the students can call the host, in this case, the teacher, for any help at any time. So it's a very flexible system for communicative activities. It is more flexible and more transparent because of the recording feature than some of the others. If you're asking the students to send you a recording of themselves doing their task at the end of class, it's more likely that they're going to do it rather than, play games. Okay, this particular study was looking at how PRCs done on Zoom stack up when compared to those done face-to-face. And my general research question was, in what ways did they differ? In the amount of feedback, in the focus or target of the feedback. So we talk about this, we talk about things like structure, that's word level or punctuation level, grammar, discourse and content. So either the organization of the essay or the relationship of ideas to the organization, if something is off topic or on topic, planning or strategic, or affect, praise, admonition, or some kind of expression of alignment. Type of feedback, direct or indirect. I didn't mention this earlier, but indirect feedback would be something like underlining it or I'm not sure about this part. Whereas direct feedback would be much more clear, something like you need an example here, or this sentence is grammatically incorrect, or something like that. And a function of feedback, are we analyzing? Are we evaluating? Are we explaining why we think what we think and how we, or is it a straight revision? I'm also looking at overall participation, and this is something that we all worry about with online lessons. How much empty air is there? How many turns are being taken? Who is taking the turns? My personal favorite, in confusion, time the students spend organizing themselves or explaining to each other what they have to do, and in the use of the teacher. That's my basic question. I did this at my university here in Seoul, which specializes in language teaching. I won't name the university, but I'm sure you can guess by looking at the conference program. 2 classes of first-year English majors taking a mandatory writing class. And the classes are the highest level of a 2-level system for first-year writing. This means that coming into the course, the students could all write a relatively well-structured 300-word essay in 60 minutes. And they were the top 40 students out of the 100 freshmen we take every year. Students are in their second semesters and we're all familiar with essay writing and peer review in some form from the previous semester. So they know what's kind of expected in peer review and they know what an essay is. The class was scheduled to be online only, but during the semester, the university migrated to face-to-face classes and then back to online. So we are online, offline, online. And this jumping online and face-to-face and back to online happened at points which coincided with new genres or assignments in the writing class, conveniently. So that let me make an impromptu study of online class, face-to-face, offline, online again, with the peer review and make comparisons. Each class had 3 homework essays. Each essay was a different genre and took 2 to 3 weeks. And prior to the genres, there were lessons on general writing. 3 genres were taught: cause and effect, compare and contrast, and process. Now, the big issue here, I'll talk later if I get a chance, is the design is not counterbalanced. Theoretically, you would have 3 classes, 3 genres, each doing them in 3 different orders, but we didn't have that. This was far less pre-planned. And that's the data collection scenario. All PRCs were recorded in Zoom. The students recorded them and sent them to me after class. In the face-to-face classes, I used a digital voice recorder on each group's desk. All the recordings were analyzed, segmented, and coded using Elan version 6.3. I should point out here, Elan is free. You could use NVivo for this. It might actually be better, but NVivo is very expensive. So being the highly paid professional that I am, I chose the free one. And some very general observations here to get us started. Background noise. This was a bigger factor online than offline. Students did not complain about background noise in the classroom. They complained about background noise online. People working from coffee shops or whatever, when they unmute their microphone, there's this blast of noise. They couldn't hear each other. Online, they were able to focus, face-to-face, they were able to focus on what their partners were saying and tune out what was going on around them. Face-to-face, students would either show their device screen, maybe they were using a tablet where they had read the partner's work, or a phone perhaps, or a laptop, or just look at their paper. They'd have a printout, but they would show and point to places they were talking about. Now, Zoom allows for screen sharing, but the students didn't use it very much. In fact, out of all the groups, only one screen shared. One person in one group screen shared while they were talking about someone else's paper, which really surprised me because I thought that would be the easiest way for them to communicate about their ideas about their partner. They just didn't use it. There were also a lot of issues with technology and a lot of talk about it. Like, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? I'm going somewhere else. Hang on, my Wi-Fi is bad here. Constant issues. And really surprising to me that online the students were still studying in groups. They were in a cafe, a dorm, etc. There are cases of roommates in the same dorm room taking my class together, working in different groups in their peer review. You could hear one student giving feedback on another student's recording. They're literally sitting beside each other in their dorm room, talking to other people online. And another case where 6 classmates went to the same cafe to have the online class, and we're sitting at one long table. So again, they weren't really, for lack of a better term, studying alone. They were meeting each other and studying online together from a prearranged point, which is kind of defeating the social distancing purpose. And it caused some issues with background noise. Okay, findings, some very quick, because I'm running out of time. PRCs done face-to-face, there were many moves to align with the content. So the reviewer would be saying things like, oh, you talked about a computer. I need to buy a new computer. So I really like this essay. There's a predominance of topic related feedback and feedback about reference formatting. When they talked about organization, they talk about the thesis statement, topic sentence, and the relationship of the content. So were things on topic? And there was often disagreement between the reviewers when they were face to face. And they would then turn around and ask me. And when there was this kind of disagreement, they also often mitigated it by saying, it's just my opinion, but I think blah, blah, blah. So we had what I hope to have from this kind of peer review. We have a little bit of discussion and debate about between the reviewers about the writer's paper. On Zoom, the feedback was almost exclusively about formatting, especially APA format. Very limited, very few groups and very few reviewers spent time talking about other people's content. There was much less overall feedback, and there were many long silences, like 2 minutes of silence. The focus of feedback when it was on structure and organization was about items taught from class and almost nothing about the ideas within the essay. And the reviewers frequently ignored what the other reviewer said. So one reviewer would just give his review, the other reviewer would just give their review, and then they just sit there quietly. And remember, the second Zoom PRC was after the offline one when they were debating. They were debating in the classroom, then did the Zoom peer review and didn't debate, didn't discuss like that. And there were no observed cases of reviewer-reviewer disagreement. And my very last, very quick point, the teacher's role and presence is very different. On Zoom, I had to be called or drop in. I couldn't observe incorrect feedback and was asked very few questions. They would just sit silently rather than ask or send me a message. And quite a bit of time was spent discussing things like the use of italics for Korean terms. It's something that is a 3-second solution with the teacher. And face-to-face, these kind of things came up in equal numbers. They were just solved immediately, as opposed to going unsolved or incorrectly solved. So my real point here is that students were not able to use either the Zoom features of screen sharing, for example, or calling the teacher and asking for help. They were able to use the traditional teacher role when they were face-to-face. They were far more interactive with each other and with each other's ideas and with the content of the writing when they were face-to-face. On Zoom, they became very passive and just did my review and stopped. So my point with all of this, I'm going to come down here, is that when we're using Zoom, whether it's peer review or for other things, how is the teacher seen and used? How can the teacher make sure he or she can engage with the students at a point in time when the students need them, because the students are not asking for it? And this is an issue with the current state of technology. I have very little time left, so I'm going to say, guys, I'm stopping here. Have you any questions for me or any comments?
Okay, thank you very much, Shaun. And if it's okay with you, Shaun, or with any other attendees, we can take a few minutes. There are sessions at 1 p.m. It is 12:55. And I had a question, Shaun.
I have an answer, maybe.
Okay, yeah. So did you get specific feedback from students? How did they feel when they were listening in the PCR process, like when the writer was listening, especially if they had to turn away and look at
yeah,
the wall?
that was in the earlier study, the 2019 study, and they felt awkward.
Okay.
They said they felt awkward, but they realized that they were that what they were hearing, and that they would have a chance to talk about someone else's paper. They just said it felt weird to not be able to talk when they wanted to.
Okay.
And my answer to them at the time and in the paper was that when you are forced to suppress the urge to talk, right? If someone says, I don't like the topic sentence, and you're going to want to jump in and say, well, I like my topic sentence, you're going to end up having an argument about the topic sentence, and you're not going to go on and get other feedback.
Mhm.
So when the reviewers can just say it and move on, say, yeah, I agree, it needs to be blah, 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 and keep going, they get more feedback.
Okay, I see.
They can cover more things. So yes, they did feel awkward about it. And that
Mhm.
is something, you know, I don't want to say they have to get over it, but that's something the teachers should communicate to the students
Right.
about either before or during the peer review.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and hopefully the awkwardness decreases over
By the end
time.
of the lesson, it does.
Yeah.
The first peer review session is usually the awkward one. After that, they kind of know. They understand why they're doing it.
Right. Great. And thank you. Just a general comment. Yeah, I appreciate the way you your research findings and analysis. It's you clearly explain it in connection to your students. It's very helpful. And yeah, are there any other questions? Anybody in the audience, you can type into the chat or turn your microphone on and ask Professor Manning.
I'm happy to answer, even if it's a really hard question. Everyone wants to run away.
So I was also wondering, Shaun, do you communicate with your student or to your students that if you give more effort as a reviewer, hopefully it will help the writer, and it will also help you. It will be good for you in your own writing.
Yeah, usually before we do peer review, we train, and this was in one of those slides I zipped right through. There's a training session using a previous semester's work, and a couple of things that need to always be brought up. And the first one is you've got to be kind, but you can't be nice. Or okay. So you have to find problems. That's your job. Being nice and not finding problems doesn't help anybody.
Yep.
And that what it does is the writer is free to reject anything you say. They don't have to fix it. So don't worry about being wrong with your review. That being wrong with your review is better than making no review.
Right.
So they're free to reject your ideas and do their own thing. It's their paper. Right.
I see.
And from that, then it gets a little bit more, they get a little bit more comfortable in criticizing. Okay. But even still, the first time they do peer review, it's almost all just nice stuff. And then because I've recorded it, I come through and we'll play a couple of seconds of one recording and say, you know, this is nice, but you're not helping. Okay, right? Good.
So it's, the recordings, I imagine that would, help them do better.
No, it's a wonderful thing, especially when we're online, to have them be able to record Kobe, I see your comment. Good idea.
Yeah, Kobe, we can talk about Shaun's presentation
anytime.
Well, it is everybody,
it is
it's 1 p.m. Yeah, I believe. Yeah, 1 o'clock. So thank you so much, Shaun. It was
my pleasure.
Very informative.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the rest of the conference, everybody. See you.
Thank you, Shaun.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome. And have a good afternoon.
Yes, you too.
Thank you.